That day, an old man was seen lying motionless, his body rigid. It seemed the old man was already dead. A young man, who was the old man's grandson, just stared at him with empty eyes. He saw his grandfather's body cut in half. Near the severed body of his grandfather, a sickle weapon was visible. The young man's gaze was empty, showing no signs of sadness or tears, even though the old man was his only family. Meanwhile, their hut, where they lived, was engulfed in a raging fire. The story shifts a few days earlier when the grandfather was still alive, and they both lived happily. On that day, the young man had just returned from the forest in the east. He looked happy as he showed a valuable herbal plant called Spirit Connection to his grandfather. He told his grandfather that he had obtained the valuable plant from the eastern region as guided by his grandfather. The grandfather was pleased with the valuable medicinal plant his grandson had found. He said the plant was worth at least 5 niang. The young man felt happy and then told his grandfather that near the medicinal plant he found, there was a fox's den. However, the mother fox was missing, and only a few fox cubs inhabited the den. The grandfather asked, "Did you kill the fox cubs?" The young man replied that he did not kill the fox cubs because their mother would be sad to find her offspring dead. The grandfather smiled and praised his compassionate grandson. He then asked his grandson to store the newly obtained medicinal plant. However, suddenly, the grandfather said in a soft tone, "Zhang, can you promise your grandfather one thing?" The young man, whose name was Zhang, didn't understand what his grandfather meant. His grandfather continued. He wanted his grandson to hide his natural instincts. He didn't want Zhang to show it to anyone. Eventually, Zhang couldn't fulfill his grandfather's request since his brother was killed in a brutal manner. He couldn't control his natural instincts. He apologized to his deceased grandfather. The story then begins in the province of Zhongyang. On a city street, a group of soldiers was seen escorting high-class criminals in a cage carriage. Onlookers jeered and cursed the criminals being escorted by the soldiers. Besides transporting several criminals in one large horse-drawn carriage, there was also a single cage carriage containing only one criminal. This made many people wonder who the criminal separated from the others was. From atop a drinking establishment, a man wearing a hat was observing the group of soldiers escorting the criminals. The criminals separated in a single carriage didn't escape the notice of the man wearing the cap. He suspected that the age of the separated criminal was almost the same as the young masters. A friend of the man wearing the hat said they shouldn't underestimate the young isolated criminal, as he might be dangerous. The man in the hat seemed to agree with his friend's view. His friend added that there was no need to fear because they were part of Murim. According to the man in the hat's friend, the young isolated criminal had killed many people with a scythe. Hence, people called him the scythe killer demon. The man in the hat only nodded as he heard his friend's story. In the end, his friend asked, "What request do you have this time?" The man in the hat replied that he wanted to hire someone. He was looking for a young man who didn't mind doing something even if it meant death. Suddenly, a villager threw a stone, hitting the head of the young criminal. The villager seemed angry and resentful towards the young criminal. Meanwhile, other villagers cursed with harsh words that were painful. The young criminal just remained silent. His head was injured by the thrown stone from the villagers. The man in the hat, sitting in the tavern, stared sharply at the young criminal. Meanwhile, the young criminal, who was actually a young man, looked with empty eyes. The man in the hat then got up and left his friend alone, who was surprised to be left alone by his friend wearing the hat. Apparently, the man in the hat hurriedly descended from the drinking establishment and left the place. On the way, he smiled and said to himself that he had found the person he had been looking for all this time. To him, the young man imprisoned was the perfect candidate for him. The day turned into night, and the story shifted to the Golden Jade Hall Palace in the Zhongyang province. Several guards were seen patrolling the newly arrived prisoners they had brought. And there was Zhang, the young criminal who had killed many people. He was locked up alone and guarded by 2 guards. "I'm too careless," Zhang said to himself. He remembered encountering a sadistic criminal who had killed his grandfather. but he was easily defeated by the criminal. The criminal was like a monster with great strength. That's why he could be easily defeated by the criminal. He didn't know how he could avenge the death of his grandfather. Currently, he didn't have martial arts skills. So, he couldn't possibly avenge his grandfather. Zhang hung his head weakly and didn't know what to do anymore. Suddenly, he saw smoke billowing outside the cage. He wondered if there was a fire. But this smoke had a different smell. Zhang tried to identify the smoke he smelled. Because of his years of smelling and consuming various medicinal plants, Zhang recognized the smell of smoke. It was the smell of purple parsnip lizard tail smoke. It turned out, the effect of the smoke was to make the prison guards fall asleep. They collapsed, unable to resist the heavy drowsiness from inhaling the smoke. Zhang slowly felt the effects of the smoke that made him weak. He looked as if he was slowly closing his eyes. Suddenly, the door to Zhang's prison room opened. A man in a hat stepped in and approached Zhang, who was weakly bowing. The man tried to remove the chains that bound Zhang's legs. As the man unlocked the chains, without realizing it, Zhang woke up. This, of course, surprised the man, who thought Zhang was also affected by the smoke. Before the man could realize what was happening, Zhang pushed him, causing him to recoil in pain. Zhang, feeling liberated from the shackles on his feet, immediately ran away, leaving the man in pain behind. Zhang didn't know what was happening. Zhang, who was not affected by the sleeping drug, ran to escape from prison. But suddenly, Zhang's steps stopped. He was hit by a nerve strike from someone, which caused him unable to move. Zhang could only be surprised because he didn't expect the person he kicked earlier to chase him and incapacitate him easily. Zhang fell and looked at the person who had just made him unable to move. He suspected that maybe the person was a martial artist who had killed his grandfather. But after observing, the person was not the one who had killed his grandfather. The person just looked similar. Suddenly, the young master approached the man called Keeper Cam. The young master asked if he was the one. Mr. Cam said the young master should have waited outside. But the young master claimed he wanted to see the prison atmosphere, because he had never entered that room before. The young master ordered Keeper Cam to lean Zhang against the wall. He apparently wanted to see Zhang's face. Keeper Cam complied with the young master's command. The young master looked happy. He said that Zhang was exactly like him. Zhang, hearing the young master's words, was surprised and looked up at the young master, who indeed had a similar face to his. Meanwhile, the young master still didn't believe it. At a time like this, he was confronted with someone who had a face similar to his. Was this fate? The young master muttered to himself. Zhang still couldn't believe what he saw. The young master then said to Zhang, "You will be sentenced to death. You will be drawn and quartered within the next 2 days." Zhang just nodded in response. And the young master said again that life is indeed unfair. They had identical faces, but were destined for different lives. Zhang just remained silent, hearing the young master's words. The young master offered a rare opportunity to Zhang to be freed from punishment. He offered Zhang to become the third young master of the great mock sword family. Zhang would replace the young master Jiangwun's position. Zhang didn't understand the young master's words. Young master Jiangwun then explained that Zhang would live in the mock residence with various facilities. Zhang would enjoy all the pleasures that the young master Jiangwun had felt so far. And after a certain period of time, Zhang would receive a lot of money and be able to leave as a free man. If Zhang agreed to do so, then Zhang had to eat this. The young master's guard gave a round red pill to Zhang. Zhang asked, "Is this poison?" The guard explained that if Zhang successfully completed his task, they would give him the antidote. Zhang was still silent and couldn't decide yet. He remembered his grandfather who had been killed by the criminal. He thought, maybe this was his second chance to avenge him. And finally, Zhang accepted the offer and swallowed the poison pill. Young Master Jiangwun looked pleased because Zhang agreed to his offer. But for Zhang, this was a second chance to seek revenge. Zhang asked, do they really want to give him a chance to be free? The young master only said that Zhang had made a wise decision. and he then ordered Keeper Cam to release the handcuffs and nerve point seals on Zhang so he could move again. Keeper Cam complied with the young master's order by removing the handcuffs and nerve point seals on Zhang's body. Zhang could breathe a sigh of relief because he was finally free from the shackles. Next, the young master told Zhang to follow him. He asked Zhang to walk in front of him. Meanwhile, Keeper Cam observed the surroundings so as not to be detected by the soldiers. Suddenly, Keeper Cam was surprised when he looked back, where the young master's head was already held by Zhang's two hands, and he twisted it. Keeper Cam glared angrily at Zhang, who had just killed the young master. Meanwhile, young master Jiangwun collapsed and didn't move anymore. Zhang looked smugly at Keeper Cam, who still looked shocked. Suddenly, Zhang said, "The fake one is dead now," and he laughed happily. The story takes a turn a few days before the Scythe Killer demon was apprehended. That night, a fire broke out in one of the houses. People were running to save themselves from the blaze engulfing the house. Amidst the flames, someone was calmly carrying a severed head. It turned out to be Zhang, wreaking havoc and wielding his weapon to strike down the people in the room. Panic ensued among the people as Zhang's sudden attack unfolded. Meanwhile, Zhang relished in his actions, driven by the satisfaction of seeking revenge for his grandfather's death. His emotions, clearly visible as he dispatched those people, were ones of pleasure and contentment. Perhaps this was Zhang's true nature, as hinted by his grandfather, who once advised him not to reveal it. Zhang wondered if this was indeed the nature his grandfather spoke of, where he found pleasure in slaughtering people. Is my true nature that of a wicked and cruel person? Zhang pondered silently while continuing to eliminate those in the room. However, suddenly, a strong kick struck his body, sending him flying. It was a martial artist. Zhang was thrown several meters, his body crashing into a wall. The assailant stood tall before him, preparing for the next attack. Seeing Zhang still alive, the assailant drew his sword, intending to end Zhang's life. Zhang, recognizing the assailant, felt that he was incredibly dangerous. The attacker stared at Zhang, remarking that Zhang was just an ordinary person who hadn't learned martial arts. However, he wondered how Zhang could withstand his deadly strikes. Then, seizing Zhang by the neck, he lifted him up. Zhang was shocked to see the assailant move swiftly towards him and grip his neck. It seemed the assailant was both annoyed and curious as Zhang had been following him. Zhang stared back, suspecting if this person was the one who killed his grandfather. Meanwhile, the assailant suddenly thrust his sword into Zhang's abdomen. Zhang screamed in pain as the blade pierced his stomach. "You're the kid who survived my attack, although you're not trained in martial arts," the assailant said angrily. He felt that now was the time to end Zhang. As he thrust the sword again, he remarked that Zhang shouldn't have caused trouble and should have lived peacefully. Zhang fell silent, feeling powerless. He was deeply disappointed in himself for being easily defeated by the person who had killed his grandfather. Soon, Zhang lost consciousness, thinking his fate had ended that day. However, fate had other plans. Zhang was still alive and was imprisoned, his hands and feet in chains. Though he was alive for now, he would soon face execution by the kingdom's officials. He hoped for a second chance to live and avenge his grandfather's death. He wouldn't waste that opportunity. And the opportunity came when he was freed by the young master Jiangwun, on the condition that he could take the young master's place. However, Zhang ended up killing the young master who freed him. Smiling, Zhang said, "Now, what about Cam's guards? The fake one is dead now." Cam's guard was furious to see the young master killed by Zhang. He immediately attacked Zhang with powerful blows, gripping his neck tightly. But calmly, Zhang said, "Isn't this the right thing? A replacement must replace the original and accept all the dangerous risks." Zhang thought that if he followed everything ordered by the young master, it would endanger his life. Cam's guards still held Zhang's neck tightly, but he was surprised why Zhang could withstand his strong grip. He asked Zhang, "Aren't you afraid I'll kill you?" Zhang replied, "If Cam's guard wanted to kill him, it would have been done by now. Zhang suspected that Cam's guard had no attachment to the young master. Cam's guard looked angry at Zhang's words, then slammed Zhang down. Zhang fell, his head hitting the floor hard. After throwing Zhang down, Cam's guard drew his sword and prepared to kill Zhang. Knowing Cam's guard would kill him, Zhang remained silent and motionless. He then said, "Do you need to kill me?" Cam's guard replied, "Why not?" Zhang gave a reason that he had taken poison given by the young master and couldn't live without the antidote. Therefore, he had no choice but to obey Cam's guard. Zhang argued that the current situation was an excellent opportunity for Cam's guard because the young master from the mock sword family would become Cam's loyal dog. Cam's guard understood Zhang's intention. Zhang could become a puppet for Cam's guard. Zhang remained silent and motionless. He awaited Cam's guard's decision. Meanwhile, Cam's guard appeared to be contemplating whether to kill Zhang or use him for his own purposes. Cam's guard was confused because if he let Zhang live, it meant he betrayed the young master. With frustration, Cam's guard began swinging his sword towards Zhang's defenseless body. That night was crucial for Zhang's fate. Would his life end here, or would he have a second chance to seek revenge? It turned out that Cam's guard decided not to end Zhang's life that night. Zhang felt a little relieved because he was still alive. Cam's guard stood up and said to Zhang, "From now on, you are the young master mock Jiangwon." Zhang remained silent, lying face down on the floor. He seemed to smile, feeling his plan had succeeded. He would devise another plan to avenge his grandfather. Several hours later, Zhang and Cam's guard were at the mock sword family's residence. Cam's guard stated that Zhang shouldn't meet anyone from the mock sword family. Zhang argued that it meant he wasn't much different from being a replacement. And Cam's guard replied that Zhang had no right to argue after choosing to be a puppet rather than a replacement for the young master. Cam's guard said that Zhang shouldn't get caught because if he did, he wouldn't receive the antidote for the poison in his body. Zhang obeyed Cam's guard's words. Cam's guard threatened that if Zhang betrayed him, he would kill Zhang immediately. Zhang smiled and promised to obey Cam's guard's orders. And Cam's guard gave the antidote to Zhang. Morning came, and the sun began to rise from the east horizon. That morning, Zhang was seen taking the antidote given by Cam's guard. He thought he was lucky today. He survived a sword thrust and had the chance to live. He thought maybe it was his grandfather's help that his life didn't end quickly. Zhang felt happy because he was given the chance to live. It meant he had the opportunity to kill the person who killed his grandfather. The killer must have thought Zhang was dead since the body of the young master Jiangwon, who was suspected to be Zhang, must have been found. Now, Zhang would pretend to be young master Jiangwon and train in martial arts with the other members of the mock sword family so that he could avenge the person who killed his grandfather in the same way he killed his. Zhang enjoyed his days filled with pleasures at the mock sword family residence. He still couldn't believe the reality that he managed to evade death. Moreover, he had the opportunity to learn martial arts in this family. However, his life at the mock sword family couldn't escape the observation of the Cam's guard. He felt disturbed because he was constantly monitored by Go Chan, who was a disciple of Cam's guard. Meanwhile, Go Chan praised his master as a gentle-hearted person for letting Zhang live. He didn't understand what was so special about Zhang that his master instructed him to keep an eye on him. Go Chan was greatly surprised when his master informed him that Zhang had killed young master mock Jiangwon. However, his master instructed him to keep quiet and not inform anyone else because he had a plan. His master only ordered Go Chan to watch Zhang closely. In due time, Cam's guard would dispose of Zhang, who pretended to be young master Jiangwon, out of the mock sword family residence. Go Chan asked Cam's guard, "Didn't you give him poison?" Go Chan argued that Zhang wouldn't obey them, unlike the original young master Jiangwon. Apparently, Cam's guard had anticipated such a situation. Zhang was not someone who would simply follow their plan. However, Cam's guard saw another side of Zhang that was advantageous to him. According to Cam's guard's assessment, Zhang was a dangerous person. Cam's guard didn't explain further details about Zhang to Go Chan at that time. This naturally made Go-chan curious about Zhang. However, he couldn't possibly defy his master's orders. Meanwhile, Zhang was still enjoying delicious food at the mock sword family residence. Until now, he didn't know why Cam's guard needed him as a replacement for the young master. What was he actually planning? During his time at the mock sword family residence, Zhang had never seen any threats. But why did Cam's guard need a substitute for the young master? Who knows? Zhang still hadn't found answers to these questions. He could only conclude that Cam's guard must have a cunning plan. Zhang tried to think about Cam's guard's actual plan. He speculated that perhaps Cam's guard was planning to switch sides. The atmosphere in the room where Zhang was looked quiet, with only Go-chan guarding outside the door. Go-chan felt a bit sleepy after standing guard in front of Zhang's room all day. He was startled when Zhang suddenly came out of his room. He asked Zhang if there was anything he needed. Zhang just replied that he wanted to breathe fresh air outside. Besides, he wanted to ask something to guard Go-chan. Go-chan instructed Zhang to be quiet and return to his room. Zhang tried to engage Go-chan in conversation, but it seemed that the guard didn't want to talk to him. He grabbed Zhang's clothes and pushed Zhang's body against the wall. Guard Go-chan reminded Zhang not to misbehave and told him to return to his room. Zhang just stared at Go-chan's angry face. Zhang tried to provoke guard Go-chan and said that guard Go-chan must be weaker than Cam's guard. And unexpectedly, Zhang suddenly pulled guard Go-chan's body and slammed him. The guard fell powerless to the floor. He couldn't move his body because Zhang had locked him. Zhang pinpointed some nerve points in his body, making him unable to move. Guard Go-chan was amazed by what Zhang could do. He didn't know if Zhang had learned martial arts. Meanwhile, Zhang continued to immobilize guard Go-chan. He said he could do this technique because he had seen Cam's guard do it to him. This further surprised guard Go-chan. He didn't expect Zhang to be able to perform this technique just by seeing it once. And guard Go-chan finally realized Zhang's potential, so Cam's guard favored Zhang. Guard Go still tried to move up. He asked Zhang if he had forgotten about the poison. You must know that you will die if you don't neutralize the poison from your body immediately. Guard Go tried to speak again, but suddenly Zhang pressed his cheek, making it difficult for him to speak. Guard Go didn't know what Zhang would do next to him. Zhang remembered the poison flowing in his body, and he bit his finger to draw blood. Next, Zhang dripped the blood that came out of one of his fingers into guard Go-chan's mouth, and instantly, guard Go felt poisoned. He found it difficult to breathe. He tried to expel the poison he had swallowed and began to spread in his body. Since childhood, Zhang had tried various poisons while searching for herbal plants with his grandfather, until finally, his blood had poisonous properties. Zhang kicked guard Go-chan's weakening body. Because of his experience with various medicinal plants, he could identify the contents of the plants even by smelling or tasting them a little. Besides, most poisons didn't have a negative impact on him, so he didn't need an antidote to neutralize the poison given by Cam's guard at that time. Zhang told guard Go-chan that he wanted to ask about the mock sword family. Zhang threatened guard Go to tell him what he knew about the mock sword family, and he would provide an antidote for his blood poison. Guard Go couldn't say anything. He just stared sharply at Zhang. This child is truly like a demon, guard Go-chan said angrily. But he had no choice but to comply with Zhang's wishes to tell him what was happening in the mock sword family. The story continues in the master's room at the mock sword family residence complex. At that time in the master's room, the leader of the mock sword family was lying weak in his bed. Master Mock Inden, the family leader, seemed to be lying calmly. A family physician near him looked desperate in dealing with the illness suffered by the master. He felt he had tried various herbal plants to cure the master's illness, but to no avail. The family physician still didn't know the cause of the master's illness. The family physician thought, in this weakened condition, Master Mock Inden should choose the heir who would succeed him. Until now, the master hadn't mentioned any of the 4 sons of the mock sword family who would succeed him, even though he was in critical condition. This made the atmosphere in the mock sword family tense. Because if the master died, The four sons would kill each other to vie for the leadership position in the mock sword family. The master's first wife, Mrs. Suk, loved her son very much. Many suspected that the first wife must have a plan to secure her position. Mrs. Suk went to the master's room and asked the family physician about his condition. Knowing Mrs. Suk's arrival, the family physician immediately paid his respects. The family physician apologized because until now he still couldn't cure the master's illness. He only mentioned that the master was being attacked by a strange disease according to him. Mrs. Suk seemed to have suspected that Master Mok Inden was suffering from a strange and unexplainable illness. She thought there might be no other choice but to use a shaman. The family physician seemed to disagree with Mrs. Suk. He said that using a shaman to treat the master was not right. But Mrs. Suk asked, "Should I just stay silent and do nothing until the master dies?" The family physician tried to explain, but Mrs. Suk didn't want to hear it anymore. She had even invited a shaman to treat the master's strange illness. She told the family physician to leave. Next, Mrs. Suk instructed the servants to close the door to the master's room and not allow anyone in because the master would be treated by the shaman. Guard Go-chan finished explaining the actual situation that was happening in the mock sword family. Jong finally understood the current situation in the mock sword family. Next, Jong asked the guard to leave. Guard Go didn't understand where Jong would take him. Jong smiled briefly and said that he would go to the master's room. Jong and the guard Go-chan went towards the residence of their master. On the way, Jong asked about the plans of the guard cam and the young master Jayong-won, which made him the replacement for the young master. Guard Go-chan explained that the guard cam and the young master Jayong-won planned to provoke the eldest son of the mock sword family, Mok Yongo, in a way that would anger him. This would lead to a confrontation between the eldest son and the young master Jayong-won, resulting in them eliminating each other. That's why the young master Jayong-won needed Jong to replace him for safety. Jong finally understood why the young master Jayong-won had asked him to be his replacement. He wanted to sacrifice Jong by having him fight against Mok Yongo, the eldest son of Master Mok Inden. Mok Yongo had a birthmark on his left cheek. Mok Yongo enjoyed drinking and had a penchant for women, spending his days at drinking establishments and with women. He had 4 equally greedy and ruthless siblings. The second son of the master was Mok Yunpyeong. He was only 18 years old, 3 years younger than the eldest son. He inherited his mother's intelligence and cunning. It turned out that the young master Jayong-won and the guard cam intended to provoke the two brothers and present Jong as a replacement for the young master Jayong-won as a sacrifice. Then, the two brothers would eliminate each other. Jong thought it was a perfect plan because if it happened, they would automatically be eliminated as heirs to the mock sword family. And if the real Jayong-won appeared unharmed, he would benefit. However, such a cunning plan could not be realized because Jong did something unexpected. Guard Go-chan asked why Jong went to see the master. Jong replied that he had heard that the life and death of the master were related to the young master Jong-won. That's why, as the current replacement for the young master Jayong-won, Jong had to visit him. Guard Go-chan reminded him that if the guard Kim found out what Jong was doing, he would surely be angry. However, Jong asked Guard Go-chan to keep it a secret. That afternoon, Mrs. Suk was seen standing in front of the master's residence. She looked towards the scenery outside the master's residence and saw someone coming to see the master. It was a shaman named Myo Shin. Mrs. Suk had heard of the shaman's prowess and trusted him to try to cure the master's illness. Then, the shaman asked for permission to treat the master. He requested that everyone stay away from the master's room as it could bring bad luck to them. Mrs. Suk understood the shaman's words and immediately ordered everyone except the guards to stay away from the place. But apparently, the shaman also asked Mrs. Suk to stay away from the place. Mrs. Suk complied with the shaman's request. She instructed the servants to leave. Mrs. Suk was actually uncomfortable with the shaman treating her husband. On the way back to her residence, Mrs. Suk saw a young man practicing martial arts. Mrs. Suk looked at the young man with displeasure. The young man was Mok Yu-chun, the fourth son of the master. He was born to a geisha whom the master liked. Because of this, Mrs. Suk despised him. She continued her journey, unaware that Zhang and guard Go-chan were walking towards the master's residence. Zhang saw Mok Yu-chun practicing martial arts. Guard Go-chan told Zhang that he was Mok Yu-chun, the fourth son of the master. He was a young man with extraordinary martial arts skills, greatly cherished by the master. Zhang asked about the martial arts move Mok Yu-chun was performing, and guard Go-chan explained that it was called the horse step, which was useful for strengthening the lower body. This move was important to learn because all martial arts originated from lower body movements. Zhang became interested in learning martial arts. He asked Guard Go, "If I learn martial arts, can I defeat Guard Cam?" Of course, Guard Go-chan was surprised and did not answer Zhang's question. Zhang reprimanded Guard Go, "Can't you hear my question?" Guard Go-chan still didn't answer Zhang's question. But finally, Guard Go-chan answered Zhang's question. He explained that martial arts could be considered internal training. Zhang seemed not to understand Guard Go-chan's explanation. Guard Go-chan explained in more detail that learning martial arts was like training to breathe properly. In other words, using the Nashin pillar to purify internal energy and gather inner qi. When someone could gather inner qi, they would become stronger. However, inner qi couldn't be accumulated in just one day. Even if Zhang practiced martial arts every day, he would have difficulty defeating Guard Cam, who had 30 years more inner qi than Zhang. Additionally, Guard Cam's martial arts techniques were perfected, and such techniques couldn't be learned quickly. Zhang understood Guard Go-chan's explanation. Meanwhile, Guard Go-chan smiled cynically. He thought that Zhang couldn't possibly defeat Guard Cam in his lifetime. Guard Go-chan explained again that there was a minimum time limit for internal training. Zhang had to start internal training at the age of 5 or 9. Otherwise, impure qi energy would get stuck, making it impossible to gather inner qi. Although he explained about martial arts training and how to get inner qi energy, Guard Go-chan still looked down on Zhang in his heart. He thought that Zhang would never be able to become a martial arts master. He would just be a frog in a well. Zhang turned around and looked at Guard Go-chan's face. He seemed to know what was in Guard Go-chan's heart and mind. And he said to the guard, "Your eyes look greedy and make me want to gouge them out." Guard Go was silent and surprised to hear Zhang's words. "Guard Go-chan, be my faithful servant." Zhang continued his words, and Guard Go-chan nodded in agreement. Apparently, Zhang was devising a plan to get involved in the conflict within the Mock Sword family. For him, it was impossible to defeat Guard Cam or persuade him to be on his side. However, Guard Go-chan might still be persuaded to work with him. Zhang still observed the young master Mok Yu-chun practicing martial arts. However, Guard Go-chan urged him to leave the place immediately. Zhang didn't understand why Guard Go-chan wanted him to leave the place. Guard Go-chan explained that young master Mok Yu-chun didn't like young master Mok Jae-won. Guard Go-chan recounted that 2 years ago, Mok Yu-chun's mother was insulted by Mok Jae-won and was considered a naughty woman. At that time, upon hearing his mother insulted, Mok Yu-chun brutally beat Mok Jae-won. Zhang laughed upon hearing Guard Go-chan's story. He hadn't expected Mok Yu-chun to still have a good heart because he didn't retaliate against Jae-won, who had insulted his mother. Then Zhang urged Guard Go-chan to leave before trouble ensued. Meanwhile, at Master Mok Inden's residence, the atmosphere seemed calm. There were no guards or servants in the corners of the room who usually served the master. In the master's room, the shaman was seen already setting up some shamanic equipment to help him treat the master. The master's legs and arms were tied with red threads connected to other threads, forming a net. The master remained silent and still. His chest appeared blue, and his body was becoming thinner due to his illness. The shaman carefully observed the master's body. He suspected that the master had been struck by a deadly energy. The energy was very strong and could devour ordinary people. However, the master managed to withstand the force of the energy, allowing him to still be alive. The shaman admired the martial arts prowess of Master Inden, which enabled him to withstand his illness. However, The master had been controlled by the energy for quite some time, so his chances of survival were only 50%. Seeing this reality, the shaman thought he didn't need to pay attention to Master Inden's condition. He only focused on finding what Mrs. Suk wanted. Nevertheless, the shaman still tried to treat Master Inden. He tried to make talismans and recite mantras to ward off the evil energy attacking the master. The talisman made by the shaman floated and stuck to the master's blue chest. The shaman tried to concentrate on understanding the main cause of the master's illness. He suspected that the illness originated from the mind. Powerful mantras were uttered by the shaman to drive away the evil energy dominating the master's body. But the shaman felt that the evil energy was very strong, making it difficult to eliminate. Nevertheless, the shaman continued to recite mantras to fight against the power of the evil energy. The master's eyes appeared red due to the effects of the treatment done by the shaman. While focusing on reciting mantras, the shaman heard footsteps approaching the master's room. He suspected that someone was about to enter the master's room. He didn't want to be disturbed while performing the treatment as it could have adverse effects. So, the shaman continued his treatment ritual. But suddenly, he was thrown back, unable to withstand the force of the attack that pushed his body. Guard Go-chan, who had entered the master's room with Zhang, was surprised by the presence of the shaman. He then looked towards the master, who was still lying in his bed, tied with red threads. Zhang paid his respects to Master Inden and then approached the motionless body of the master. Meanwhile, the shaman was still surprised to see the arrival of the two. Zhang looked at the master with respect while observing his weak body. The angered shaman, feeling his healing ritual disturbed, yelled in anger, driving away the guards Go-chan and Zhang. Meanwhile, Zhang paid no heed to what the shaman said. He focused solely on observing the condition of his master. The shaman remained furious at the arrival of the guards Go-chan and Zhang, seeing their presence as disruptive to his healing ritual. He believed their arrival had disrupted the process and made the malevolent energy even stronger. Go-chan's guard did not understand what the shaman was saying, but the shaman still tried to expel them both from the master's room. Suddenly, the people in the master's room were startled by a sound coming from the master himself. Zhang, still watching over his master, saw the master's mouth open with wide eyes. Then, abruptly, the master's body lifted from the bed. Seeing this, the shaman suspected that an evil energy had possessed the master's body. He asked Zhang and Go-chan's guard to help him restrain the master's body, fearing that the red thread bindings on the master's legs and arms might come loose, posing a danger to the master. Quickly, Go-chan's guard and Zhang held the master's vigorously moving body. The shaman then took out an amulet to combat the evil spirit controlling the master's soul. The master's hand suddenly gripped Go-chan's guard's wrist tightly, causing him to scream in pain. The shaman felt worried seeing the master's condition, fearing that a powerful evil spirit had taken over. He was anxious because it could endanger others. The shaman said that the spirit might transfer to Go-chan's guard's body, who was being gripped by the master's hand. Go-chan's guard, upon hearing the shaman's words, became scared that he might contract the same mysterious illness as the master. He grew even more terrified seeing something creeping from the master's hand towards his own. Zhang, noticing the threatening presence, immediately drew his weapon. With one swift stroke, he severed the master's arm. Go-chan's guard and the shaman were shocked by Zhang's action. Go-chan's guard managed to escape the threat of the creature trying to enter his body. Zhang saw the creature that had controlled the severed arm of the master attempting to crawl back to the master's body. He stared sharply at the creature and began swinging his sword. Go-chan's guard shouted for Zhang to stop his intent to sever the master's hand. However, Zhang seemed not to hear Go-chan's guard's shouts. He proceeded to cut off the master's right hand to stop the creature from approaching the master's chest. And finally, the master's right hand was severed into two. The shaman quickly attached the amulet to the severed hand of the master to destroy the evil entity within it. Meanwhile, Go-chan's guard quickly tried to stop the bleeding in the master's hand. The shaman was confused by the chaos. He thought he should leave the place as soon as possible to avoid blame. But suddenly, Zhang's sword threatened him. Go Chan's guard didn't know what else Zhang might do. Zhang asked the shaman if the creature was the one making Master Inden sick. The shaman explained that the creature was threatening the master's life. He needed to treat the master immediately because otherwise, the master could die. Did Zhang also want the master to die? The shaman asked Zhang in response. Apparently, he had spoken incorrectly. Smiling, Zhang looked at the shaman sharply. He asked, "Who wanted the master dead? Who was the person who instructed you?" The shaman tried to correct his words, claiming there was a misunderstanding. However, Zhang threatened the shaman with his sword to tell the truth. And finally, the shaman confessed that he was ordered by the First Lady. The First Lady instructed the shaman not to save the master's life. The shaman was only tasked with finding the master's seal and secret manuscript using evil spirits. Zhang still did not understand what the shaman was saying. Meanwhile, Go Chan's guard, who knew the cunningness of Lady Suk, did not expect that Lady Suk had already executed her evil plan so that her first son could inherit the master's position. Go Chan's guard told Zhang that they had to restrain the master immediately. He thought they had to prevent the first son from becoming the master. Moreover, Zhang's life as the young master of Jiangwun was also threatened now. Zhang understood Go Chan's guard's words. At present, he had thwarted Lady Suk's plan. That cunning woman surely wouldn't let him off easily. The shaman, still under Zhang's sword threat, said he could still save the master. He would do anything for the master's recovery. However, Zhang instructed the shaman to find the master's seal and secret manuscript instead. Go Chan's guard and the shaman were surprised to hear Zhang's command, instructing the shaman to continue searching for the master's seal and secret manuscript. The shaman tried to refuse Zhang's order because it could endanger the master's safety. However, Zhang insisted that he comply, and the shaman could not refuse Zhang's command for fear of being killed by him. The shaman began preparing equipment to achieve his goal of finding the master's secret seal and manuscript. He took out a small doll attached to an amulet. The small doll would act as a container, because if the master connected with evil spirits once again, he would die. So, the shaman would connect the small doll with the master and trick the evil spirits into thinking that the doll was the master. And the shaman resumed his ritual. He placed the small doll on the master's severed hand. The shaman began reciting his ritual mantras. The master's severed hand gripped the doll very tightly. Meanwhile, the master screamed loudly as the shaman recited his mantras. Zhang and Go Chan's guard observed the shaman performing his ritual. The shaman continued reciting mantras, making the master's grip on the small doll even tighter. The shaman felt the energy of the evil spirit very strongly. If he forced it, the evil spirit could break free. However, the shaman was sure that Zhang would continue to pressure him to find the two valuable items. He didn't know what to do. The shaman tried to think and find the best solution. The shaman said to Zhang that he would contain the evil spirit. But wouldn't there be a problem if he stayed here? Go Chan's guard looked frightened by the ritual performed by the shaman, and he thought about leaving the room. Meanwhile, the shaman began the ritual again. He recited mantras to communicate with the evil spirit. With all his strength, the shaman tried to summon the evil spirit. A few moments later, the effect of the shaman's mantra made the master scream and say, "Who summoned me?" Apparently, the evil spirit had already possessed the master's body. The shaman continued reciting mantras to suppress the evil spirit to obey him. He wanted the evil spirit to answer the questions he would ask. The body of the master, possessed by the evil spirit, seemed to resist the power of the shaman's mantra. The recitation of mantras uttered by the shaman caused the evil spirit to feel pain. Zhang and the shaman stared sharply at the body of the master, who continued to scream. The grip of the master's severed hand on the small doll became even tighter, eventually crushing the doll. The shaman was shocked to see the power of the evil spirit. He then ordered Zhang to cut the red thread. The evil spirit tried to take over the master's body through that thread, and Zhang immediately cut the red thread to stop the evil spirit from infiltrating the master's soul. However, after the thread was cut, many hands emerged, attacking Zhang. The hands grabbed Zhang's legs and crawled over his body. Zhang stared sharply at the shaman in front of him. Meanwhile, the hands increased, crawling over his body and face. The shaman attached an amulet to Zhang's face. Meanwhile, Zhang remained silent, unmoving. As it turned out, the evil spirit had been harboring intense anger from the start, with a strong desire for destruction. It was only a matter of time before the evil spirit broke free and became uncontrollable. Now, the evil spirit had transferred to Zhang's body. The shaman felt he had completed his task and was about to perform small acts on Zhang. Zhang seemed to be already influenced by the evil spirit that had entered his body. Meanwhile, the evil spirit was furious for being deceived by the cunning shaman and vowed not to forgive him. The angry spirit, harboring its rage, observed the body of Zhang that it now controlled. It was intrigued by Zhang's young and attractive body. Thus, it decided to take over Zhang's body, replacing its old master. The evil spirit removed Zhang's soul, trapping it in its own subconscious forever in the underworld. Zhang's trapped soul suddenly found itself in a place deep within the forest. Trying to assess his surroundings, Zhang attempted to recall something. He observed the river in front of him, feeling it was a river he often visited to fetch water. Slowly, Zhang began to recognize the place, a peaceful and tranquil mountainous forest. He remembered it well as a place he frequented to fetch water. However, he felt something was slightly different today. He sensed something unknown. Suddenly, on his way back home, he was startled by flames ahead of him, presumably coming from his house. Without hesitation, Zhang ran towards his home, remembering his grandfather whom he left behind. Zhang ran as fast as he could, fearing for his grandfather's safety. Upon arriving in front of his house, Zhang was shocked to see his grandfather's body lying on the ground, mutilated. He screamed, calling out to his grandfather, who lay lifeless. He lifted his grandfather's body, hoping for a response. However, his grandfather was already dead. Zhang was overwhelmed with peak anger. Who could have done this to his grandfather? He didn't know. With a mix of sadness and rage, he realized how precious his grandfather was to him. Zhang wept before his grandfather's corpse. The evil spirit stood behind Zhang as he wept for his grandfather's death. "So, this is what you desired," the evil spirit murmured. Then, it directed its palm towards Zhang, who was unaware of its presence, still mourning his grandfather's death. Zhang continued to weep, but suddenly, he heard someone calling his name. "Zhang, what are you doing there?" Zhang looked around for the source of the voice and saw his grandfather talking to him. His grandfather urged Zhang to help him quickly. Zhang was, of course, shocked by what he saw. Wasn't his grandfather dead just a moment ago? Why was he now alive? Zhang still couldn't understand what was happening to him and hugged his grandfather with joy. Meanwhile, his grandfather couldn't comprehend Zhang's sudden strange behavior, embracing him with joy as if they had just met. His grandfather asked, "What's happening? Why are you acting like this?" Zhang simply replied that he was very happy and didn't want to lose his grandfather. The evil spirit remained near Zhang, observing what had just happened. It laughed gleefully, having trapped Zhang's soul in a happy past with his beloved grandfather. The evil spirit continued to watch as Zhang and his grandfather conversed. It whispered to Zhang, urging him to stay with his grandfather forever. Zhang glanced towards the voice he heard whispering. Suddenly, he seized the evil spirit's head. It seemed Zhang intended to destroy the malevolent spirit. With a sardonic smile, Zhang told the spirit that it was responsible for him, recalling the unpleasant events, catching the spirit off guard as it wondered how Zhang could see it. The evil spirit had misjudged Zhang's desires. Zhang sought revenge more than happiness with his grandfather. In Zhang's view, The evil spirit should have ensnared him in a desire for revenge, not happiness. It dawned on the spirit that Zhang's soul was consumed with a desire for vengeance against those who had harmed his grandfather. It should have avoided individuals like Zhang, driven purely by malicious intent. However, the spirit couldn't comprehend why humans possessed such qualities. Zhang, do you know why you were given that name? Suddenly, Zhang remembered his grandfather's words. According to him, Zhang was a unique child. He hoped Zhang would grow up to be honest and good, not straying from the right path. Eventually, his grandfather's figure faded and vanished. Seeing Zhang's anger, the evil spirit felt threatened. It struggled to free itself from Zhang's grasp and fled deep into his consciousness. Zhang's soul pursued the terrified spirit. The spirit considered itself fortunate for having entered Zhang's body. From now on, it had to tread carefully within his consciousness. Suddenly, the evil spirit found itself in a lush green meadow. Nearby stood a door in the middle of the grassy field. It wondered if it had entered deep within Zhang's consciousness. It observed the sealed door. Was it Zhang's memory that he had sealed? And why was it sealed? The evil spirit still didn't grasp what it was facing. Approaching the door, the evil spirit attempted to open it, thinking it could. However, upon touching the door, it felt restrained. It sensed Zhang's soul trying to take over. The evil spirit struggled to break free from Zhang's grasp, fearing being consumed by him. The story then shifts to the master's chamber, where suddenly Zhang's eyes opened. The shaman, seeing Zhang recover and reclaim his body from the evil spirit, was surprised. He hadn't expected this turn of events. Meanwhile, Zhang rose slowly and faced the shaman. The figure of the evil spirit stood nearby. Zhang glanced at it, recognizing it as the demonic monk. The summoned evil spirit then paid respects to Zhang, seeming to have become his follower. And thus, the tale of the legend of Heavenly Chaos Demon comes to a pause. If you enjoyed it, we'll be sure to update you with the continuation of this story. Please leave your comments and likes if you enjoyed the story. And for those who haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe to receive the latest updates on this story. Thank you for watching, and until we meet again.